Everybody, I'm going to remain anonymous because I am addicted to RC. I wanted to do this video because I've seen a lot of videos out there about RC that's really informative, especially about this build I'm doing right here, which is the GT conversion, converting the factory team GT kit. It's, I think, about 15 years old at this point. I found it for really cheap. It was a brand new kit, and it basically had a bunch of small shit missing out of it, which was really great because it took a long time to figure out which parts were missing to actually be able to order them up and get them on the way. But I am really happy with my decision to build this project, even though it's taken way too much time, and I will not indulge in how much time I've actually got into it at this point because I am embarrassed. All right. I got obviously you see the motor plate right there. It's critical for this build. I've seen videos out there that say that you just take the time and alter a T4.1 plate and this and that. And if you're going to do this project for the first time, don't just spend the money. You're going to end up spending a ton more time altering a plate rather than spending the $27 to actually buy one online. So this is it so far. This is all just for mock-up. I've got the wheels from old Dirt Hogs. Shout out to Dirt Hog. They're a pro line for making the Dirt Hogs. These things are. I'm surprised they still exist. I've used them so much. So obviously I got the shock set up. It's a very nice carbon fiber shock towers. Just might add. The outdrives or the axles. It comes with MIP CVD axles, and wherever it is on the box, it says they're in there, and that was one of the things that was scabbed out of it. So I bought some axles online, and they were actually for the GT2 MIP CVD axles for the GT2, and they did not. I didn't like them at all. They would actually where the outdrive is. Right there. Where the outdrive is, where the dog bone goes all the way into the outdrive, they would hang like right on the edge of the outdrive, and they're just too close. And for what I'm doing, even with the suspension set up the way I'm going to set it up, it was just the dog bone was too. It was out too far this way. They were too short, basically. Even with the suspension all the way up, they were just right on the edge of the outdrive, which is BS. I spent some money on those, and there was a video that the guy mentioned you can use those particular outdrives for the GT2. That did not work. Also, something else in the videos that I was watching, and I'm sorry about the lighting because it sucks. Let me turn that on. Okay, that's better. For the transmission, these screws right here, okay? When they come through the back over here, this has threads in it for the stock setup. So there's threads in the plastic right here. You need to drill those out. Do not leave those. Don't leave those threaded, because when you're going to end up threading into that, and then it's not going to line up to this, and you're going to end up stripping it out. Okay, because this right here, this little nub has threads in it, so that's what's going to hold it. Drill those threads out. You will take way longer if you're trying to fight that screw from thread to thread, from the threads of this plastic to the threads of that aluminum. Just so you know. So yeah, also I wanted to say thanks a lot RPM, because these A-arms were actually mismarked in the mold. I don't know if I'm going to be able to see that L right there? Yeah, that L is on the right side of the vehicle. Okay? The R is on the left side of the vehicle. The molds were messed up. I don't know exactly what happened, but you see, obviously the RPM is on the front, and everything is exactly where it should be. Okay, so something was wrong there. That took me a little while to figure it out. If you get RPM A-arms for this setup for the Factory Team GT, just know that you might have trouble, because if you swap, there's a little area right here, right down here, where it's actually dished to accommodate the drive shaft. If you flip them over, there's a little hump there, so that's not good because it won't work. So so far, pain in the ass was the steering, the front, because I went from the stock setup, which the stock setup for Team Associated is going to be your where the bearings are actually incorporated into the wheel, and I don't. If I'm going to do a high-speed run, which I am planning on doing with this, I don't want that. I don't want. It doesn't seem as efficient as having the bearing carriers, where the bearings are actually in the bearing carrier, and there's a hex set up on the front. But doing that, I don't know if it was just because it's Team Associated to Traxxas. I had to put a spacer between the actual hex and the wheel, because when I would thread the nut on all the way, there would still be play. Like it was threaded on all the way, and so that spacer took up the clearance. I also had to make it. I had to fabricate a shim, a Team Associated shim, because it wasn't, the inner diameter was too. There wasn't enough clearance, and it wouldn't go on the axle. So I had to drill out the Team Associated rear shim for the rear bearing carriers, and I opened that up and I put that in there, and it took, basically what had happened, there's play going this way in and out, so it took up all that clearance. So now I have no play at all. Okay, so after that, I'm planning on putting the spacers in here, so really it's only going to let the suspension drop about that much. It won't let it go further like that, so that in turn it's actually going to tighten up the spring also and make it more like a road shock. This is it so far, but obviously I haven't got the spacers in there. I got to take the shocks off, drain the oil, obviously take the shock out, put the spacer in and whatnot. What else? So that's about it so far. There's also been discrepancies about the transmission. You can't use a GT2 transmission in the GT. You got to use a GT transmission. However, the differential from the GT2 will work in the GT Factory Team GT transmission case. The idler gear will not. From the GT going back to from the GT2 going back to the GT1, the GT2 idler gear will not work. However, and I've seen videos on where somebody was saying you can use the B4 top gear, which gives you I forget what he was saying. Anyway, I used everything from my T4.1, which I have sitting over there in the corner, all bastardized. I took a bunch of parts from that to mock this up. And so yes, I used the top gear of the T4.1, and it worked, but there was too much clearance going left to right, this way, left to right. So I actually had to fabricate some shims and put them inside the transmission before I put the bearing in on this side, right here, when it was apart on this side of the case. And also I had to put a shim between after I put the shim in, and then a bearing, and then another small shim, and then the top gear, and then I closed the case. So you might not want to go through all that. You might, but I didn't want to go from the stock setup for the Nitro would be just the spur gear. There's no slipper clutch. But using the 4.1, I could just use the slipper clutch from the 4.1 with the Big Daddy gear, wherever it is. This guy. And also I got a castle set up. I'm trying to do this without spending a shit ton of money. That's a 36 tooth gear. I did find out that you can use the stock gear from the 4.1 buggy, the B4.1, which is 6 teeth. I think 5 or 6 teeth smaller on the spur gear, so you'll get some extra miles an hour out of that also. Um, I just got this. I don't know how it's gonna work. My other Castle motor that is beat to shit over here. Oh, um, is so old. I beat the crap out of it, and it still runs like a champ. I gotta shout out to Castle a little bit on that, and this too. Oh my gosh, I've had it so long, and it just endured so much. This setup with this ESC and this 36 tooth gear, I think I was getting like 60 miles an hour. But that was with these wheels on it, and these wheels, as you know, you can't use these for high speed runs. They'll balloon out, and you lose control, and then you end up having to replace A arms and stuff because they go flying off. So that's it so far. I just ordered some Jayco wheels that I'm going to put on here because I've been hearing a lot of good stuff about speed runs as far as using the Jayco wheels. I bought a cheap, I think I already went over that, a cheap servo. I'm going to try using my older 5050C battery, the Venom battery. That thing's also held up like a son of a gun. With this setup, with the 36 pinion and the spur gears, I think it was 81 on that, and the stock, gearing for the GT. And like I said, I don't know if I even got to this. The dog, but I ended up, instead of using the MIP CVDs, which I built and bought and all this other crap, I ended up going straight with another thing I want to mention is this thing came with the RPM rear bearing carriers. Okay, I was going to use them because it's got the RPM A arms and everything else. But the only thing is, there was no bearings for those bearing carriers in this kit that I bought. Okay, so that was a problem because I started looking for the bearings, and they're really oddball sized bearing, and I even forget the size, but it's just the outer race is just giant to accommodate the bigger area of the bearing carriers. But problem solved. Just use the 4.1 dog bones with the 4.1 axles, and I think the even 4.1 bearings will fit in the stock bearing carriers for the factory team GT. Okay, that was an issue. I the only ones I could find were like in Australia, and they were only like $100 plus shipping and everything. So I went ahead and ordered the stock bearing carriers, hoping that the stuff from the 4.1 would relate to this vehicle, and fortunately it did. And now once the suspension is where I need it to be, the dog bone's going to be right exactly where I want it. I don't feel comfortable with it way out this way, all the way at the edge. So yeah, if you see right here, that's almost where it's going to be, and that's comfortable for me. I've tried to tighten every single clearance on this thing before doing the high speed runs, and wow, that was a lot longer of a video than I actually wanted to do, but I guess that's it for now. Thanks, bye.